Most people hear full potential and immediately manufacture a future self, clearer, braver, more disciplined, more magnetic. The current self gets treated like a rough draft, and potential becomes the fantasy of finally becoming acceptable in high definition. That is already the distortion. Potential gets imagined as a polished identity up ahead, so life gets postponed in the name of becoming. And that postponement can last years, not because nothing is happening, but because so much is happening in the wrong place. Thinking, planning, refining, preparing, healing, waiting for alignment. Meanwhile, the potential becomes one more thing we use to avoid the embarrassment of contact. We talk about what we could be while continuing to live at a safe distance from anything that would expose what we actually are. That is the pain in this whole topic, full potential. It sounds inspiring, but for a lot of people, it functions like a very elegant hostage situation. It keeps them devoted to a future version of themselves instead of available to reality. It lets them stay in imagination where everything is still possible and nothing has yet been risked. They get to feel rich in possibility while remaining poor in consequence. So if we are going to talk about realizing full potential, it has to be stripped of all the motivational perfume. It is not about becoming better. It is about exposure. It is about what gets revealed when the structures that keep our mentally inflated stop doing their job. And so the step number 1, question the story. The first thing you need to crack is the story. Not just one story, but the whole running narration about who we are, what kind of life this is, what is wrong with us, what still needs to happen before we can really begin, what our gifts are, what our wounds are, the phase we are in, what is our true path. We should all look at all of these stories that we confuse for truth. People carry this thing around like sacred biography. It explains everything and permits nothing. And the story loves the language of potential because potential gives the story room to survive. Potential means we do not have to be here yet. We are becoming, just unfolding. We are not late, just preparing, just not hiding, just integrating. We are not avoiding, just being intentional. And the story can dress up paralysis so well, it starts looking noble. That is where the pain gets ridiculous. A person can spend half a decade saying they are not fully expressed yet, while refusing every condition that would actually expose expression. So the first movement here is not upward. It is not empowering. It is the collapse of credibility in the story. The story stops sounding profound and starts sounding repetitive. It starts sounding like someone mildly high on self-interpretation, explaining for the 14th time why the conditions are not quite right yet. And in that exposure, there is already something alive because the future self loses some of its glamour. And the fantasy gets less holy. The whole act starts to smell a bit stale. And then the step number 2. Notice that potential is just presence plus the unexpected. The second crack is even more offensive to the ego. What we call full potential is usually not the grand flowering of the identity we imagined. It is not us becoming the person we always hoped we were. It is much stranger than that. It has more to do with presence and the unexpected than with the self-image. Presence here is not some spiritual technique. It is simply what remains when the story is not occupying the whole room. It's less narration, less self-reference, and less constant inner commentary about what this means and what this says about us and whether we are on track. And from there, something inconvenient happens. Life starts entering. The unexpected shows up. That is where potential actually lives. Not in the image, but in the collision. In what happens when reality interrupts the script. In the conversation that goes somewhere unplanned. In the desire that appears outside the approved identity. In the ability that reveals itself only under pressure. In the strange opening that no amount of visualization would have invented. In the contact that produces a self we could not have described in advance. This is why so many people chasing their full potential look a bit spiritually sedated. They are too busy guarding the image of what their life should become to notice that life is actually trying to reveal. That is both the pain and the opportunity. The pain is that the cherished self-image has to be betrayed. The real me we were grooming may not be the thing, and the capacities that matter may emerge somewhere we would never have chosen, through conditions we would not have called aligned. The opportunity in that life becomes larger than the imagination we were trapped in. Potential is no longer the reward for successful self-construction. It becomes what appears when construction loosens and reality gets a turn. I describe the mechanism in my book, How to Achieve Nothing. It's for spiritual seekers trying to force life through strategy, constant optimization, and constant mental pressure. And what starts opening when that whole performance begins to lose. You'll find it in the description. And step number 3, live from contact, not from planning. The third thing that becomes impossible to ignore is that planning can never deliver what contact exposes. Most people use planning the way anxious people use menu reading. It gives the feeling of participation without the risk of eating anything. They plan their expression, plan their visibility, plan their next chapter, their business, the relationship, the move, the identity, the purpose. And planning becomes a beautiful, organized way not to find out. And that is where potential gets quietly murdered. Not in dramatic failure, in excessive distance. Not that clean, respectable separation from reality where everything is still under consideration. Life remains conceptual, and because it remains conceptual, the self remains protected. Nothing has yet happened that could just disconfirm the fantasy, resize the ego, expose the fear, or reveal the actual capacity, or force a response. But planning cannot reveal capacity. It can only protect image. Contact reveals capacity. Contact reveals whether desire is real or decorative. Contact reveals whether this thing matters enough to survive inconvenience. And contact reveals what we become when the script fails. Because it reveals the part of us that only exists in emotion and would never be found in self-reflection alone. That is the opportunity here. Not some cheerful promise that everyone is secretly extraordinary. Something much less flattering and much more alive. Life is bigger than the character we keep trying to perfect. Potential is not the successful completion of that character. It is what gets exposed when the character loses central command and reality starts answering back. What we call potential is often buried under narration, protected by fantasy, and starved by distance from life. And yet, once the mechanism is seen, there is a different kind of possibility. Not the inflated kind, not the kind that lets us keep dreaming about a bigger self. It's the kind that begins when plausible deniability starts collapsing, when the story sounds stale, when planning starts looking suspicious, when the hidden greatness fantasy stops comforting us, when contact becomes more interesting than self-image. That is when potential stops being a flattering promise and starts becoming something real enough to cost us our favorite explanations. And that is also the first moment it has any chance of actually being lived.